Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. Joining me as ever is Joe Tomlinson, and very specially welcome back Pato.
Hi.
He's back, baby. How are you?
I'm good. Oh,
You excited to be back on the Continental Club set?
I mean, I'm back on Joe's birthday, so...
Exactly, a special
What
day.
a present!
Make sure you leave a comment saying happy birthday to Joe. How's the first week been back?
I mean, this is a weird moment.
This is a weird moment, very intense.
It's actually not been as as I thought.
Excellent.
So I'm looking forward to some drinks tonight, because I need one.
Perfect. Right, we'll dive straight into the first question, and it comes from our favourite person at the moment. It's Menez18, and he says, how can PSG overcome their UCL mental roadblock and live up to the level they spend? And will Neymar leave in the summer? So obviously It's been a disastrous week for PSG. They were knocked out following a 3-1 defeat at home
Get in!
to the Red Devils.
What a shame, Di Maria.
And it just compounds more misery in the Champions League. So since being bought by the Qatar Sports Investments in 2012, they've never made it past the quarterfinals and been knocked out in the round of 16 for the last 3 years. So they got knocked out in the quarterfinals by Barcelona, then Chelsea on away goals, then Barcelona again, Man City the following year by a 76-minute winner, then that incredible game in the Nou Camp to Barcelona. Then Real Madrid simply outclassed last year, and then they just didn't really show up.
To our under-15s, Scott McTominay running things.
It
Get the Qatari
was
Sports
crazy.
Investment Company signed in for 200 million. We'll say no, because he's Scott McTominay, mate.
So yeah, disastrous spell in the Champions League for them. Not had a good return on their £1.1 billion pound investment. Sorry, that's euro investment since their takeover. Only Chelsea, I was surprised Chelsea and Man City have spent more in that period.
Chelsea, that's crazy, though.
I know, really surprising. And obviously it led to some quite ugly scenes after the match. Their owner was fuming. Neymar had to be restrained by staff. They were saying it was a disgrace. The penalty was a joke. So it's all sort of fallen apart for PSG in the Champions League. And Pato, what do you think's gone wrong? What have you made of PSG this season as our Parisian expert? And how can they get rid of this roadblock, as Menez asks?
I don't really believe in the roadblock. I think it's invented.
What?
I think in order
They're not getting passed around.
In order to win the Champions League, you need to be a really good team, and you also need to get quite a bit of luck. When you look at PSG, the times they've gone out, yes, they went out to Real Madrid last year. Real Madrid went on to win it. When they went out to Barcelona the first time, at that point they were still kind of building. Chelsea won, a little bit disappointing. But the Barcelona and the Man United ones were games that were decided by penalties that never should have been. Now, don't get me wrong, they should never have let United back into this fixture the other day. United played really well, PSG were not spectacular. But if that penalty hadn't been given in the final minutes of that match, they'd have gone through and we wouldn't be talking about this. Yeah, it shouldn't have been given, and neither should... I think it was 2 penalties in that game when they lost 6-1 at the Camp Nou, which was just... It was a bit of a freak game, to be honest with you, but there were just a bunch of dives in it. So, I don't know, when I look at PSG, yes, they have problems, and yes, I think they've had issues with squad building, and yes, I think it's weird that Lo Celso is out on loan and Rabiot is leaving on a free, and I think those guys are their 2 best midfielders. I think they're better than Verratti. I think they're better than all their other options there, as much as I love Verratti and Paredes. However, they've now got their best coach they've had since Ancelotti, and I think that they will continue to improve. I think that how they move on from Thiago Silva is going to be quite interesting. How they move on from Cavani is going to be kind of interesting. But generally speaking, I think that they're a better side than they were a year ago. And if this penalty hadn't been given, then it's a totally different story. But everybody, results and narratives are made by results. So I don't know. I don't know if there is a mental roadblock in the same way that if they'd gone through, because say Kimpembe had actually handballed it, right, on purpose, but there was no VAR and it hadn't been given as a penalty, and they'd gone through, would we then be talking about, how they finally managed to overcome this voodoo? I'm sure that is what all the tabloids would have been saying. So I just always think that this is bull kind of designed to sell papers, and overall it doesn't actually really map onto what happens on the pitch particularly accurately.
On the Thiago Silva replacement, do you think that they move Thilo Kehrer into the middle of their defence, or do you think they go out and buy a big centre-back this summer?
They tried to get Jerome Boateng last year.
Yeah, I think they probably do get another centre-back. Kehrer is still incredibly young. And overall, there are a lot of really young players in that squad. I think that they're likely to go and get a more experienced centre-back just because Kimpembe is young, Kehrer has still got a lot of mistakes in him. Marquinhos at the moment is playing central midfield. So
Which is bizarre.
I would probably, well, I don't know, he's been amazing there.
brilliant.
Yeah, he has been good.
So I would probably go out and get a little bit more experienced centre back, but like not an old centre back. Somebody like Skriniar or whatever would be ideal for them. But I really don't think that there's a big difference. And actually, to be honest with you, while the Qatar Sports Investment Authority something, like while they do want to win the Champions League, they don't give a shit about getting a return on their investment. Like this is a money for them. They throw money into it because what this is a propaganda exercise for them.
To promote
like
their
they don't
country.
actually they're not involved because they really care about Paris Saint-Germain and turning them into a force in European football. They have succeeded in doing that. They're not really bothered. What they want is to have a way to kind of launder their international reputation.
But in order to do that, you know, the publicity of going far in a Champions League would only help.
Yeah, of course it would help, but I mean,
I actually don't think the PSG squad is particularly brilliant. I think they've got some fantastic individuals in terms of particularly forward areas, but I think there's some pretty glaring holes in certain areas. I don't think their fullbacks are anywhere near the level required to win
their fullback
Champions
support,
Leagues. I think if you're asking how old is Carrère, 19?
Yeah,
Maybe
so.
19, 20? I don't think Carrère is a right back that you start and win Champions Leagues with. I don't think even potentially Kazawa on the left. I understand that Dani Alves is a viable option there, but let's face it, he is firmly in the twilight of his career. And
same with Bernat on the left as well.
And same with Bernat.
Bernat and Kazawa, Meunier and Alves. This is not a good set of centre
fullbacks at all. I completely agree. I think the fact that they've lost Rabiot on a free this summer is a disaster. That's a player who they should be pulling in 100 million for if they had him down to a proper contract. That's a proper Arsenal situation, where they're losing a star player for nothing because of off-the-field issues. Obviously, the forward line is excellent, is brilliant. But even I look at that, and I think with Cavani aging out, they're probably going to have to bring in another forward in that area, unless they want to go with a Neymar and Mbappe front two. Behind those two,
well, it's Choupo-Moting.
Where do we go? Choupo-Moting, like that drop off.
I think that was an FFP issue that they let Guedes go and brought in.
Yeah, but that is a ridiculous drop off in standard from Mbappe and Neymar to Choupo-Moting.
I mean, they still have Di Maria and Cavani right now.
Yeah, Di Maria especially.
And they've got young talent as well. There's almost no club in Europe that produces young talent like PSG because they're the only big club in Paris, and Paris produces more young talent than any other big city in Europe. You know, so they do have players like is it Moussa Diaby who's coming through, and they've got Nkunku who's an excellent kind of midfielder / wide player.
In terms of depth, they are. I think they're probably outside of the top 5 in Europe in terms of squad depth. They've got some fantastic individual stars, but that does not give them the right to go quarter-final, semi-final every year of a Champions League because, as we've seen, the best teams in Europe have the most elite rotation.
You might have a point.
And PSG don't have that.
It depends who your best player is, though, because when you look at some clubs, you say like, okay, maybe if City didn't have the depth, you'd look at them and you'd say, is say Aguero or is De Bruyne good enough to take them to a Champions League title? Maybe not. But if you have the first or second best player in the world and kind of the third or fourth best player in the world, then maybe the calculus starts to change. So Mbappe, I think, has been pretty clearly the second best player in the world this season. Neymar, when he plays, is always up there in kind of the top 3 or 4. When you have 2 of those guys, if a team had Messi, we would say they've always got a chance. So what's the difference between them having Messi and them having Mbappe and Neymar?
I think the difference is that they're both in that forward area. I think that if one of them, like Man City, like we talk about Man City, if one of them was a centre mid and one of them was a forward, I would tend to agree more. But like when we saw them go to Anfield and they didn't have Verratti, they were a disaster in the midfield. Like they're all over the place, and Liverpool were unlucky not to batter them that day.
But maybe Lo Celso comes back and this helps. You know, Lo Celso is a guy who is.
I think he's agreed though to go.
Well, I think they've got an option to buy at 25 mil, but I could also understand if PSG said, you're going to come back and we're going to make you a regular starter, that he might say no and return. And they definitely should do that, especially losing Rabiot, because otherwise they're going to have to invest hugely. They've already missed out on De Jong. So I don't know. I kind of think that I understand what you're saying, but I do think that like the rudiments are there to have a side which could win the Champions League, and they're not that far away overall. And I think Tuchel will be a little bit more organised in terms of what he wants and how he rebuilds this squad than guys before who were perhaps a little bit happier to have it built for them.
Although you'd be kind of surprised if the first semi-final they ever make, they then go on to the final and win it. So you'd expect like it takes a bit of experience to do that. It's very rare for a club. The only one I can think of is Chelsea.
But equally,
it depends what you mean. I mean, Liverpool got to the final last year, and they hadn't been in the last stage of the Champions League for years. Like none of those players have been there.
Good point.
But equally, like I look at Tuchel, fantastic coach, definitely one of the best in Europe. But I wonder whether he is ever truly going to have the say of this is the player I've identified, this 22-year-old coming out of Germany, or whether, as you've already said, the propaganda machine that is the Qatari Sports Investment Company are going to go, I would rather have a 30-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo than I would the 23-year-old that Thomas Tuchel wants.
I think we're seeing that disappear a little bit more, though. The fact that they brought in Thilo Kehrer, I think, is a sign they're willing to do that. The fact that that Kimpembe has been a regular starter for them shows a bit of willingness too. And also, the other thing to mention as well is that Neymar hasn't played in the round of 16 of the Champions League this season or last season. He's been injured both times, and
he's a match winner as well.
Yeah, I think that if they'd had Neymar, I think that probably would have got them another goal, and then they would have been home and dry.
Let's move on there, because that's one of the big storylines of this week, is what impact it has on his future. I mean, obviously he's got an incredible record when he's played, but he's still only played 46 Ligue 1 games in the last 2 years. And got something like, I've got it down here, 43 goals and 24 assists, which is just absolutely remarkable. But Joe, what do you think this means for his future? I mean, we saw him looking pretty gobsmacked at the side of the pitch as his sort of future seemingly passed him by.
I mean, I would be surprised if he's still at Paris next season, I think. I don't know, maybe that's just me being super cynical about the PSG project and where Neymar really wants to be playing. I'm not convinced that he actually wants to be at PSG. I think he would, in his mind, still prefer to be at Madrid, but that move just couldn't happen because of the Barca versus Madrid rivalry, and he needed to take a stepping stone away in order to come back to Spain. That is the reason, in my mind anyway, that he went to PSG in the first place, in order to come back to Spain with Madrid. But whether or not Madrid are going to want to go out and chuck £250 million, which they probably have to get Neymar, at a player when they can go and get 2 or 3 players for that same price that are younger and have high ceilings, maybe not as high as Neymar's, but combined will give you as good an output. I don't know whether they're going to want to do that, to be totally honest. And if they don't want to do that, who the else is going to want to do that? Because Man City aren't going to spend the money to go and get it because they've got elite wingers already. You look at Raheem Sterling's output, Leroy Sané still incredibly young. Riyad Mahrez project hasn't quite worked out, but you know, they still spent £70 million, still I believe their record transfer up to this point. So
United have other priorities.
United don't. I couldn't imagine Manchester United going and getting him
and
now.
You don't need another guy who plays on the left, however good that guy is. Bayern won't spend the money.
And the only other option in my head that I can see is feasible is if Hazard goes to Madrid, Chelsea go, okay, we're going to go for Neymar, but that would require ridiculous investment. There's no guarantee they're going to be in the Champions League.
It's a lateral step at best.
I'm not convinced he works in Maurizio Sarri. I'm not convinced he works in the Maurizio Sarri system either, Neymar.
Oh, I don't know.
I think a player of that talent
have to
work.
Playing like Insigne, I don't know.
He would be good. But equally, are they going to be able to afford him at $250 million? They've got a 2-window transfer ban, so the only time they could do it is this summer.
Depends how much they were to get for Eden Hazard, but to be honest, if I were Real Madrid and I had the option between paying, say, 150 for Hazard and say 250 for Neymar, that's not even a question.
What would you do?
Obviously go for Neymar. I would never pay over 100 million for Hazard.
And Neymar
at this age,
Neymar would definitely go to Madrid. All he talks about is, it's every footballer's dream to go to Madrid. And you know what? El Clasico totally needs Neymar to go to Madrid because over the last few months, it's been dead.
Real Madrid needed talisman.
As a neutral, and maybe Barcelona and Real Madrid fans will disagree with me, but as a neutral, I don't even know El Clasico's on sometimes. It's like, it's on 11 Sport again. Oh, is it?
Though actually, as a contest, it's still happening. Like I'd say, like the one that Real Madrid lost 3-0, weirdly, they were by far the better team.
Yeah, it was close.
And again in the 1-0, but they just have absolutely no cutting edge.
Yeah.
And so you think, if you drop Neymar in, a little bit of star power.
And it's still a bit fallible at the back, as they always are. But it's an interesting, from PSG's perspective, because they're in a bit of, obviously, a lot of trouble with financial fair play. They're 150 million down on what they should be on financial fair play. Neymar's on 40 million a year wages. Would it be the worst thing to accept an over 250 million euro bid and get someone like Memphis Depay? Get a much cheaper guy who's not as effective in France, but been in that league for 3 years now, done exceptionally well. I don't think it'd necessarily be the worst thing. So, Pato, if Neymar was to leave in a hypothetical world, who should PSG get to continue their assault on Europe?
Well, I mean, I'd be fine. I'd be fine with the idea of Memphis Depay, but I think they'd probably go for Sancho. Like, I think Sancho's.
Do you not think Depay's ahead of Sancho in his development, though?
Well, in his development, sure, but I mean, he's a lot old.
6 years older.
He's a lot older. He'd cost a lot less.
I think they want an instant return.
He'd cost about half the amount, but there's nothing to suggest that Sancho wouldn't give you an instant return. I mean, it depends what else you want to do with the squad. If I got 250 mil, I'd be happy to turn that into, say, Sancho and Aaron Wan-Bissaka and a top-class left-back, and that would pretty much, I think overall that might improve the team, given that Neymar's played 1,100 minutes in the league this season and hasn't played in the crucial matches in the Champions League. I'd kind of think, is my team really measurably going to, decrease in quality if I do that?
And we've seen him take risks on the youngsters before. Not risks, but I think everybody knew Kylian Mbappe was going to be an incredible player, but they were willing to go out and spend 150 mil on him. And if they're willing to go out and spend 150 on Kylian, I don't think there's anything to say they won't go out and spend 90 to 120 on Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, and if Real Madrid want him as well, then you can say, okay, well, in return we want, say, Hakimi and Kovacic or something, and you can work something out. Like, I think that genuinely, given how few minutes Neymar's played and given the development that Mbappe has made this season, I think that having top-class left and right backs would probably overall give you a better side at PSG.
So
than
do you
having
think they
Neymar
should sell him?
right
Do you
now.
think they should sell him?
Yeah, I think if you get an obscene offer, you should sell him. Like, generally speaking, I wouldn't have thought that I'd come to that conclusion, but when you look at their fullbacks, they're bad, and I worry about the fact that they've managed to turn what could have been the most talented midfield in Europe into a bit of a mess.
A total mess. Yeah, I completely agree. I think they should sell Neymar if the right money's on the table from Real Madrid.
Well, there you have it. Menez, I hope you enjoyed our answer. We'll move on to the next question. The next question comes from @SarthVK. Thank you very much for your question, mate. And he says, what's gone wrong with Roma this season? Well, in short, quite a lot. Eusebio Di Francesco has been sacked. In just over a month, they have been knocked out of Europe by Porto, obviously this week, lost 3-0 to Lazio in the Rome derby, and dumped out of the Coppa Italia, losing 7-1 to Fiorentina. I believe it was Federico Chiesa doing all the damage there. Disastrous year, backing up a year where they finished third last year, I believe, in Serie A and reached the Champions League semi-final. Their form of late was actually picking up until this recent spell, but it's just been so inconsistent all year. I mean, Pat, where do you think it's gone wrong for Di Francesco?
I think this is one of those situations where looking at the stats is actually really helpful, because if you didn't do that, then you would look at this team and say, wow, they were really good last year and something's gone seriously wrong this year. And while they were better last year, they weren't as good as they looked.
It's a lot of Alisson.
Yeah, they had Alisson working magic in goal. He meant that they overperformed their defence and they got a little bit lucky at stages in the Champions League, and that meant that they reached the semi-finals, which is perfectly possible. And Serie A, they managed to get the kind of bounce of the ball when they needed it as well. This year, I think they've been woeful defensively. Like, if you watch a Roma game, it's like a basketball match. It's just end to end. And I don't think Di Francesco is a particularly great coach, but I also didn't think he was doing a great job last year either. Some crucial personnel have kind of gone wrong for them. I don't really like their defensive guys, and De Rossi's aged and they're still playing him, which is perhaps not the greatest idea. And plus, Dzeko started the season a little bit slowly, but really the crucial thing...
Well, then he had that fight with the fans, and then he was nearly sacked, I think, Dzeko, at some stage this season. It all sort of fell apart for him. I might not have got that completely right, but it all fell apart.
Well, he's well into his 30s as well now, and they're just relying on these players. And I know people do that in Serie A, but you do have to do some succession planning. But really, to me, the big problem here is replacing Alisson with Robin Olsen. Like we said it at the time, I think we put it in the worst signings of the summer. Maybe that was a little bit harsh because Olsen's not a clown, but he's not Alisson's level at all. He's faced a lot of shots this season, so I feel a bit sorry for him. The defensive problems are clearly not just his, but really a little bit of some poor choices in squad building by Monchi and some bad management is enough to turn you into basically Arsenal from last season.
I mean, the transfer of Nzonzi in particular hasn't worked out at all.
Yeah, Pastore as well.
Yeah, Pastore, yeah.
Pastore was a
What's
rank.
happened to him?
So then on the other hand, Zaniolo, and Pellegrini, and like there
is a lot of talent there.
There are these. There's loads of talent.
But I think this is
Clive
one of the biggest
under.
problems with Roma. I think they've got a really weird squad mix of personnel that are too old and are aging out, the likes of Nzonzi, De Rossi, Edin Dzeko, Kolarov, who's actually had a fantastic season. But they've also got over 30s and then sort of a big pack of under 23s in the likes of Schick and Cengiz Under and Patrick Kluivert. But they've got got the quality in between those age groups. So they've got a lot of development players and a lot of players aging out, but they've got no one in the prime. So I don't know how they've managed to build this squad. Monchi, I like.
Florenzi and Manolas and stuff. I mean,
yeah, they've got. You're right. Manolas, maybe I'm being a little bit
very
harsh
often
with,
injured. Those
but
guys,
there's too much disparity between them, in my opinion. Anyway, and I think Monchi, as much as the link to Arsenal is fantastic for him, and he should definitely take that job if he can, I'm not overly convinced he's done a brilliant job at Roma. I think he's made some nice signings and some signings that I'm sure Roma fans in the future will look back on very favourably. But I also think missing out on players, maybe it's not his fault, but I think missing out on Malcolm was a big hole for Roma this season, and obviously not his fault when Barcelona are on the table and the deal has been agreed. Remember that video that he gave and he was like, oh, it's not my fault, blah, blah, blah. Quite emotional about it. But that was a big miss for them, not getting Malcolm in. And Malcolm's played no minutes, and I'm sure he probably regrets
Especially when Justin Kluivert's not ready to start every
I think he probably regrets that move, Malcolm, now. Looking back on it, he probably thinks he should have gone to Roma. But players like that, missing out on that sort of player.
Joe,
I don't think the project's worked with Monchi and Eusebio Di Francesco at all.
No. We have to talk about the luckiest man in football right now, Claudio Ranieri.
Mate,
caretaker boss to the end of the season. How has that happened? He's nearly cemented Fulham's relegation. Had an awful spell there. Now he's back in the Roma boss. It's bizarre.
It's because he's one of the nicest guys in football. So he has incredible relationships with every major owner and every major sporting director, doesn't he? So Has
he managed Roma before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he's like seen as, isn't he? He's a safe pair of hands, he's a nice guy. He'll come in and give the squad a little bit of a lift. Obviously, it went totally wrong and he hammered his reputation at Fulham, in my opinion.
Tough place to take over, though.
I completely agree, but then don't take over.
I think he just returned to the reputation he had before Leicester, to be honest with you.
But that is detrimental because his reputation at Leicester was like, oh, I'm up here. And then it's like, Fulham.
Well, you still got the Roma job. So.
I don't know whether they must be hoping that they can get Sarri in the summer because otherwise, or maybe Jardim or someone.
Or Conte.
Because otherwise, but is Conte not available now? If they'd gone to Conte and said, come in now. This is the thing, as much as we talk about bad squad building and stuff, and Nzonzi was bad and I hated it at the time, and Pastore, whatever, and Olsen bad. I think that if you put Conte in charge, I reckon that they'd probably be really solid in the space of about a month.
The reason that Conte hasn't taken a job is because of his off the field court issues with Chelsea. Because he's still owed 20 million euros. I think there's a clause somewhere in the contract if he takes a job, he doesn't get the payout.
Jesus.
So he's trying to either settle out of court or his lawyers are taking Chelsea to court. So that's the reason he hasn't, I think, taken a permanent job so far to this day.
I honestly think if they hired Conte in the summer, then they'd have one of the 5 or 6 best coaches in the world, and they wouldn't be that far away. I think he'd fix their defence regardless of the personnel. And sometimes these moves don't work out. I think Monchi would probably have a bit of a better time at it if he did go to Arsenal, because I don't really know what they said to him about the money he could and couldn't spend. But
there's a few.
What about Jose to Roma?
Well, no, he's off to Real Madrid apparently.
I have heard this chat.
How the f*** is he getting jobs of this level?
It's crazy.
How is he? He is now an Everton level manager. What is he doing?
Because Florentino Perez is an absolute panic merchant, and Santiago Solari has been a total disaster there.
I don't think that's true. I think Solari really improved them until recently.
There was an instant upturn in results. The Ajax result is inexcusable, but they just stay until the end of the year. They're gonna finish third. They're going to finish third. They're out of the Champions League. It's pretty embarrassing how it's gone. But
those Real Madrid fans don't accept just bumbling along at 4th place, 3rd place.
Do you really want
But
Mourinho?
what's Mourinho going to do?
Well, they're hoping that Mourinho's upturn means they finish 2nd, or at least gives them a boost. It's a horrible decision.
It's a completely forgettable year for Real Madrid, except for the emergence of Vinicius. Why don't they just finish 3rd and get someone they want this summer? I can't actually, off the top of my head, think of an elite coach that would be available this summer.
Mauricio Pochettino.
Well, they want Pochettino, and apparently they're also interested in Klopp.
It's difficult to get hold of.
Yeah, I also read the same reports that they're really interested in Jurgen Klopp.
I don't think he'd go.
I don't think he'd go.
I think I can see why Pochettino would go. I can actually see why a manager would go to Real Madrid though, because essentially they're going to say to you, this summer we're going to buy you 2 of the best players in the world, and there's still f***ing loads of talent there. Like if I was Pochettino, I think, do you remember how good my defence was when I was playing like Davinson Sanchez in his first season in the UK? An injured Danny Rose or Ben Davis and Kieran Trippier. Like, do you remember how good my defence was there? How good is it going to be when I have an admittedly old but still good Marcelo, Carvajal, Varane,
Marcelo's leaving.
Ramos? Hakimi coming back?
We don't know that for certain. Is that confirmed?
I think he's not confirmed, but he's very close.
But then in that case, Hakimi comes back. Plus, you've got Odriozola.
Played really well in his space.
You've got so much defensive talent there that I'd think, you know what, you give me that, give me a couple of midfielders. I could actually do kind of a lot with this team.
Whereas I could, like, the Mourinho, I don't understand in any realm. Like, he's obviously the favourite to get the job at the moment. In fact, like, if Santiago Solari leaves, if say it's announced today and Mourinho is announced straight off the bat, it wouldn't shock me. That's how, like, odd this situation is. Although I did see a poll in Marca that said that only 24% of voting fans wanted him at the club again, despite the fact there was plenty of chance. There was a few videos, wasn't there, of Real Madrid fans after the Ajax game going, Jose Mourinho. And I was thinking to myself,
what
you don't know what you've got coming.
Yeah. God. I mean, how has he managed to get that? He left Man United close to relegation in the top 4. And now he's walking into the Real Madrid job, 3 months later?
It's the relationship of Jorge Mendes and Florentino Perez. It really is. It's the Jorge Mendes effect, the most powerful man in football.
But that doesn't work on the fans. Like, the fans screaming for him. That is a weird one. But then again, I think we forget that Real Madrid under Mourinho were actually really fun. Yeah. They were actually really exciting. I mean, it ended badly. Awesome. But they played good football, and they played quite exciting football as well. So, I don't know. I mean, if it's just till the summer, then it doesn't really matter who's in charge. Like, I might as well be in charge of Real Madrid until the summer, so long as then they can pick up Pochettino
and
Klopp.
Supposedly the talks of his relationship with lots of Real Madrid players being awful when he left is not quite true. Actually, a lot of them really respected him. They just, don't necessarily...
Just battered him in the press just because they could.
Yeah, he's an easy target to pick. And I think it was...
Yeah, the Casillas thing's forgotten now.
It's all
long gone.
And they respected him as a coach as well, I think. So, yeah, we've got quite a few... that's a crazy section. Eusebio in, Francesco out, Ranieri in, maybe Conte in the summer. If not, look at Gasperini from Atalanta. That'd be a great buy. And then Mourinho to Real Madrid. What the hell is going on? We'll move on to Under the Radar. Okay, just before we leave, we're doing Under the Radar. This is a new section where we cover 2 players you might not know that much about because there are no big matches in Europe this week. But still tune in to ERU on Monday, please. But Teji Savanier is the person that we're going to cover first. 27-year-old central midfielder. What have you made of him this year, Pato?
He plays for Nîmes, and they're kind of mid-table in Ligue 1 right now. But he's an interesting guy. There was a lot of talk about him, I think, a few weeks ago because those people who put up those charts on Twitter where it shows kind of key passes and dribbles, and he came up really well for progressive passes and progressive runs. Kind of 2.5 dribbles a game, but 2.6 key passes, which is pretty impressive on a minnow. A couple of shots as well, and nearly 5 tackles and interceptions a match. So he's kind of the guy in your midfield who can do a little bit of everything. He's going to get you up the field, but he's also going to pull his weight. So I don't know. He's maybe a little bit old now for a big move, but when you consider that he's playing for a side that were only promoted last season, and yet he's contributing 0.5 expected goals and assists a game, and I think 0.5 real goals and assists a game. That's pretty special. It's just he's one of those guys I think who's just going to fall by the wayside a little bit.
27, man, he's too old.
Yeah, he's not going to leave, or if he does leave, it'll be because his contract runs down or something, and like Lille or whatever might pick him up. But I don't know. He's one of those unsung heroes of Ligue 1, and so I don't know. He's probably worth watching. If you see a good French team like Lyon playing Nîmes, then maybe it's worth checking out Teji Savanier.
Yeah, fair enough. Nîmes have been a bit of a surprise package this year. I mean, I think they got promoted last year.
They hit 6th.
They were 6th. Yeah.
Tell us a fact about Nîmes, Dukes. You've got one in your locker.
Their manager's called something like Rolando Blancart.
I thought you were going to pull the what fabric?
So which
denim?
Yeah, denim. I did a pub quiz a few weeks ago when Pato was away, unfortunately, and that was one of the questions. So denim is from Nîmes.
Yeah.
But João Felix is another player to look out for, Joe.
Yes, obviously you've probably seen his name linked heavily with Manchester United for no reason other than the Portuguese press just love to stick Manchester United in a headline to sell titles.
Still with Bruno Fernandes.
I think it was...
they literally just put a random number
They just go, Manchester United. No, it was like João Felix and Ruben Diaz, Manchester United, and literally I reckon everybody in the office just threw darts at a dartboard that had a figure on it, and it went 150 million euros.
Yeah, like 2 guys you've barely heard of.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, João Felix he's having a great season for Benfica. 19-year-old attacker, breakthrough year really this season. Very limited minutes. I think 900 minutes, something like that. But 9 goals this season. I think he's actually involved in a goal every 56 minutes for Benfica.
Jesus.
Has been their standout attacker, but it is a pretty poor league, not doing too much disservice to Porto, who are obviously flying along in the Champions League and playing some decent football. But Porto actually let João Felix go when he was 9 years old, and may well be regretting that if he does get a
really, I didn't know that.
50, 60 million euro move this summer. I think the issues are with players coming out of Portugal is that they're so hit and miss, especially youngsters coming out of Portugal. They're guaranteed to be part of the George Mendes carousel at some stage, so I wouldn't be totally surprised if João Felix ends up at Wolves. Yeah, they have also been linked quite heavily to him, although it would mean breaking their transfer record, probably spending upwards of 50 million euros. Got some of his stats down here. 2.1 shots a game, over a key pass, winning three free kicks per match. I believe he's the youngest ever goal scorer in the Lisbon derby as well. Okay. So he is getting a bit of pedigree. He's making a name for himself.
These are not spectacular stats, though.
Not spectacular at any stage.
When you see a guy that age coming out of that league, I kind of want to see insane numbers.
Especially for 50 million euros.
Upwards of 4 shots.
And also when you watch him, he's quite one-footed, and he doesn't have top-level speed.
I'm very unconvinced. I think, though, it may end up being a case of some backhanded deals done by George, and he ends up at Wolves on loan with an option to buy or something like that, as we've seen with a lot of Portuguese players like Ruben Neves, who have extremely high ceilings. So don't be surprised to see João Felix at Wolves this coming summer. But as for the reports in newspapers like Record or Ebola linking him with Manchester United, it's just classic propaganda from the Portuguese press, like when we were signing William Carvalho for 15 seasons in a row, or when we were signing Gaitan, which actually went on for 34 years.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's 2 players under the radar, and we are going to roll straight into the end ball because we don't have time for quick-fire questions today because we have given you an absolute football feast of information. So
still trying to make football feast happen.
Still trying to make it happen, yeah. Joe, what would you like to push to?
Come over to Football Daily, watch We Need to Talk. Pretty crazy incident happening in the Turkish leagues over there. Bloke snuck a razor onto the pitch. One of the players snuck a razor onto the pitch and has now been banned for life. So if you want to hear more about that story, check it out.
Classic Turkey. Pat back, would you like to say anything?
No, I'm good, mate.
You're good. Thanks very much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.